also like to thank all our veterans here for their service, and to the two gentlemen on the panel that served. My husband is a 21-year Vietnam-era veteran, but that in itself does not qualify him for Congress. So you guys are going to have to give me a little more. So why don't all four of you give me your thoughts on tort reform?
I think that is a great question. The truth is, tort reform is part of the plan that I've actually put out to address health care. The truth is, the dialogue after the Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare has been whether it's right or wrong. How about we actually have a plan to move forward? I'm the only candidate that has actually put forward a plan to move us forward after we get Obamacare repealed. It's my FTC plan. The F stands for fraud, the TD stands for tort reform, and the C stands for cross-state competition. The truth is, in tort reform specifically, that one problem drives up the cost of health care by over 25%. Now, there's someone on the panel I'm sure is going to debate that with me because the law lobby is very much against any type of tort reform because they like the scenario where if you trip over an extension cord in the hospital, it's like akin to winning the lottery. We know that drives up the cost of health care, but more importantly, what tort reform does, if we address it right, is it changes the scenario around defensive medicine. The practicing of defensive medicine where you walk in with a simple rash in your arm instead of getting cream, the doctor orders 25 tests, is driving up the cost of healthcare, and it's killing the opportunity for you in terms of choices and access. I would actively, as one of my first priorities, go after tort reform.
I want to repeat something Jesse just said. Sometimes I like calling Jesse because he pretty much says what I want to say. I think the biggest impact, though, that we can make is by using the Commerce Clause to make sure that insurance companies can compete fairly amongst all the states. That was the reason why we had a Commerce Clause. We had, early on in our nation, the states were fighting against each other, erecting trade barriers to prevent each other from their merchants coming into my state, and then there's back and forth, you can't come into my state, back and forth. That's the rule, that's the reason we had the Commerce Clause. So why not apply it in its correct fashion and make sure that insurance companies are able to compete freely across state borders? That will help all of us. That allows the free market competition to drive down the cost of health insurance for everybody.
I think tort reform can be expanded beyond just the medical industry, and obviously everybody understands tort reform is driving up the cost of the medical industry, whether it's 10%, some people say Jesse's got 25%, I'm not an expert in it, but so it's somewhere between there. But torts also drive up the cost across our economy. It's in business, it's in your personal affairs, across the board. We have to get a more common sense approach to that, allow, like England has, where you can actually, if you bring a frivolous lawsuit, you can charge those costs back to the person bringing that frivolous lawsuit, doing things to, again, bring down the cost of tort across the economy, not just in the healthcare sector.
Any diminution on your right to go to the courthouse is a loss of your civil liberties. Think about that before you give it up, number one. Number two, the idea that 25% of the healthcare bill is related to tort claims is ridiculous. It's closer to 1%. Number three, 100,000 people at least a year die as a result of medical errors. So, you would essentially be closing the courthouse doors to those people. Now, number four, the financial debacle that we face now is a direct result of closing the courthouse doors in the mid-90s to people who would otherwise hold managements and corporate boards responsible for their thievery. So be careful on that. One area where there might be some tort reform at the state level is in limitation of damages or the abolition of punitive damages. But those are state issues, and I support those states that do make those decisions.
Can you explain to me what free markets means and how you stand on that issue, if it is an issue?
To me, free markets is synonymous for kind of the messiness of competition that has made America such a great economy. It doesn't attempt to have a state-run, state-driven economy. It's not like Europe, where a bunch of smart people trying to get out and tell people, tell their folks how they're going to operate, where they're going to allocate their dollars. Free market is the messiness of competition. It's people winning and losing, businesses succeeding and failing, and allowing the individual that opportunity. Thanks.
To me, free markets is simply when you have a limited amount of government involvement in whether or not you trade with somebody else, right? If you're conducting a trade and you're not injuring somebody else at the same time, you should have no government involvement with that trade. That's the basis of private property rights. And property is essentially your life energies wrapped up into an asset. So when we have life, liberty, and property rights, per our Declaration of Independence, because when it talks about pursuit of happiness, it was really talking about property. It just couldn't say property because the South would take advantage of that, and the North was steadfastly against slavery. So they had to come up with an idiom. An idiom is when you say something, but everybody knows what you mean. They meant life, liberty, and property are our inalienable rights. And when you interfere with that, you are interfering with the free markets that are a way that you can trade those life energies that you store into the assets that you have with private property.
Free market, to me, is competition with limited to no government involvement whatsoever. The truth is, let's look at it this way, the more the government has gotten involved, the less free enterprise and the free market works to create jobs without someone trying to come in from the top down. And sometimes that's a helpful example or helpful exercise to see what it is not. Free market is not the president picking Solyndra as a company and investing millions of our dollars into it to try to grow an industry. The free market should have dictated that instead of the president trying to dictate it. Specifically in this district, the free market is not the president through the EPA basically trying to shut down anybody that wants to be involved in the coal export business. The coal export business, which is going to, if they shut it down, cripple the economy here. But if we leverage it and let the free market dictate, we'll create an abundance of blue-collar 21st century jobs. And give us the opportunity to show the rest of the world how to leverage our coal in a way that honors our land at the same time, so that the rest of the world can see how we can do it and make a profit. Thanks.
A free market at its ultimate root is the ability to make a deal with somebody else amongst yourselves with no government interference, no price setting like they do in the healthcare system, no prohibitions about your deal where you have to meet this regulation and that regulation. We have a specific part of the Constitution that makes it illegal for the government to interfere with contracts, but it's ignored 1,000 times every minute. That's really what a free market is, and we're way, way away from a free market right now where prices are set in every industry a number of different ways. We need to really look at that, the reason for that constitutional prohibition of the government interfering in contracts, because that's what kills the free market, because the free market is at root free contractual arrangements between individuals.